To move the motion, please.
Thank you, Sir Roger, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I beg to move that this House has considered e-petition 590405, entitled Dedicate Funding for Research into Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, or FOP. This petition closed with 111,186 signatures, including 162 from my own Carshall and Wallington constituency. I'd like to begin, Sir Roger, by thanking the petition creators, the Bedford-Gay family, FOP Friends, and Drs. Alex Bullock and Richard Keane for meeting with my office to share their stories, experiences, and expertise of FOP. I'm incredibly grateful for their help, not only in preparing myself, but preparing other honourable and right honourable members for today's debate. And I know that many colleagues are keen to speak this afternoon, not least of all my right honourable friend, the member for Hemel Hempstead, who has been a champion for his constituents on this issue, and I look forward to hearing his contribution. I will keep my colleagues brief to give every colleague the opportunity to speak. But I'd just like to set out firstly what FOP is. FOP is a rare, very rare, genetic degenerative condition that causes the body's bone to develop in areas where it normally wouldn't, progressively locking joints in place and making movement more difficult and eventually impossible. Eventually, those with this condition will become 100% immobile, almost like a human statue with a healthy mind locked inside a frozen body. It's one of the most debilitating and disabling conditions known to affect children in their early years with no treatment, cure, or prevention. Once it progresses, there is no way to reverse its trauma, because trauma causes more activity. Something as small as a knock, a bump, or even a fall can trigger more bone growth. Likewise, the trauma of misdiagnosis and related medical treatments, such as biopsies and injections, can also trigger bone growth. Even unrelated illnesses like flu can trigger bone growth. So I can only imagine the stress and the horror of the last 2 years during the COVID-19 pandemic for these families who have children suffering with FOP. FOP does its worst damage in a child's early years. Whilst the condition will progress over time and at different rates, and no two individuals will have the same journey, most people with FOP are immobile by the age of 30. The statistics and details of FOP are powerful, but not as powerful as the stories of those sharing their experience of this condition. And I'm very grateful to the petition creators, Helen and Chris Bedford-Gay, for sharing their experiences of Oliver's story. When their son Oliver was 3 months old, he had what some medical professionals considered to be funny toes and a lump that began to appear on the back of his head. Oliver's consultant concluded that the lump was not cancerous but should be removed nonetheless. Shortly after Oliver's first birthday, the consultant diagnosed him with FOP. The family were led to believe that he would be fine as long as he avoided contact sports such as rugby. And it was only later, when Oliver's parents searched for more information themselves, that they discovered the true implications of what a diagnosis of FOP would mean. FOP results from a single gene mutation, which was only discovered in 2006, so there is very little information or experience on this condition which is easily available to the public or indeed to medical professionals. And therefore, consequently, with such a large barrier to access relevant knowledge and guidance, the Bedford-Gay family was seemingly alone, with nowhere to turn for help and support. At this point, there was just a small patient group, but no dedicated UK charity to supporting families with FOP, and indeed funding research. So this prompted the Bedford-Gay family to establish the Oliver's Friend family, or now known as the FOP Friends. And in short, FOP Friends aims to further the research into FOP and related conditions by supporting current and future research projects, as well as supporting families suffering from the condition and raising awareness. Since the charity began, FOP Friends have raised over £700,000 to help their work. FOP Friends have now been able to work alongside the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital, the FOP research team at the University of Oxford, and other international FOP patient organisations on this fight. Since Oliver's diagnosis, thanks to these organisations, there have been leaps forward in the research, in awareness, and indeed in treatment. However, there remains so much more to be done, and it cannot be done alone. So FOP Friends are calling for 3 key asks of government. Firstly, to increase research funding into FOP. I understand my right honourable friend, the member for Hemel Hempstead, will no doubt delve deeper into this topic, so I will not steal his thunder. But the University of Oxford FOP research team, led by Dr. Alex Bullock, has been investigating how the mutation that causes FOP is activated in patients and what might be able to stop this from progressing. However, this research receives no government funding. Their research into a new drug, which could be used to treat FOP, has been put on ice due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is unlikely that external funding will be sourced to conclude this clinical trial. As a rare condition which only impacts 1 in a million people, many consider there to be no commercial incentive to fund FOP research. However, because of what FOP causes, research into it could help solve problems in unwanted bone growth, and conversely how to encourage it in other major disease areas, including military injuries or surgeries, severe burns, osteoporosis, or heart disease, for example. FOP is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this research. Unfortunately, there is no mechanism for the Oxford team to obtain emergency funding for a clinical trial which is already underway. And whilst the government has pledged over £6.6 million of funding via the National Institute of Health Research and UK Research and Innovation for more general bone disease research, there is some confusion about how this has or will be applied to FOP research. As I understand it, this funding hasn't been seen by the Oxford research team, so I would be grateful if the Minister could shed some light on this issue and the potential mechanism for this team to access emergency research funding. Secondly, the petitioners are calling for the government to transform the standard of care that patients receive. The government's rare diseases policy, the UK Rare Diseases Framework, offers a vital opportunity to transform and improve standards of care for patients and families across the country. With only a handful of NHS clinicians with FOP experience, FOP patients receive varying levels of medical care and home support. I am aware that FOP Friends do amazing work assisting families in school settings with education, as well as health and care plans. Carers of FOP patients are often parents or siblings, as the specific needs of FOP patients can be tricky for others to understand or manage. And too often, those who suffer from FOP and their families have their ability to work, live, and contribute to society limited by this condition without wider institutional support. So I would be grateful if the Minister could confirm and outline further how the UK Rare Diseases Framework could better support families and patients with FOP. Thirdly, the petitioners are calling for the government to help increase awareness of FOP and transform diagnosis. As I mentioned earlier, as a fairly newly discovered condition, there is a serious lack of knowledge and experience in FOP. Misdiagnosis and mistreatment, such as biopsies and vaccinations, etc., can cause the condition to worsen and trigger irreversible bone growth. Early diagnosis is absolutely crucial, not just to treat this condition, but also to prevent avoidable early progressions, which is why it's so important to raise awareness of FOP amongst medical practitioners. Now, I understand there have been calls to make the teaching of FOP mandatory in medical schools, so I would appreciate if the Minister could say a few words on that issue as well. A genetic test does exist to confirm the diagnosis of FOP, but currently only specialist clinicians can request this test. An application has been made to include FOP as part of the rollout of the NHS Genomics Medicine Service, which is funded by NHS England, and allow a wide range of clinicians to request a test if they suspect FOP. Now, I understand the directory of approved tests will be updated in April 2022, and I hope the Minister can enlighten us as to whether FOP will be included in this, as this will increase access to genetic testing and reduce time to diagnosis. I'd like to once again, Sir Roger, pay tribute to Oliver and his family, as well as the many other organisations, researchers, campaigners, and other families who have worked tirelessly to fight FOP, many of whom I'm sure we will hear about this afternoon. But I appreciate there are many other colleagues that want to get in, especially the Right Honourable Member for Hemel Hempstead, who has got a great degree of knowledge in this area. So I will bring my remarks to a close, and I hope that we can have a productive debate on this issue and the key asks that have been outlined by the petitioners.